be a snack back there.
Are we recording now? We are. Hi, welcome. This is Malayna with Reverend Mike McMorrow.
Greetings.
And
peace and blessings.
This is Thoughts on Talks.
Thoughts on Talks.
Where we share our thoughts on the Sunday Talks. And yesterday, March 1st, was called the Holy Reimagined. I'm going to do a screen share of what I think you said yesterday. Where's share screen? There it is. About the Holy Reimagined. I pictured it like that.
Oh, you totally reimagined it.
That's not what you meant?
No,
It's
but that's
holy. It's completely reimagined.
I was thinking the holy, as in the holy.
That's
reimagined.
Okay.
But you know, this is very clever.
So this, well, I got to give credit to Ricky Byers for the holy way, because that's the holy. She uses both of them.
Well, see, I never knew that.
So props to Ricky
clever
Byers.
Ricky.
I tell you.
Speaking of the divine feminine.
Yes. So that's what the talk was about, which is why the holy was being reimagined. And we're trying using 2 cameras and a screen today. So we're going to do a poll later and see if it was good or
so which
not
one am
so
I
good.
Supposed to be looking at?
I think this.
Because it has a green light.
I don't know. You know, it's anyone's guess. So as I was going through the notes and listening to the talk and all of that, the divine feminine, the thing I thought of was the movie, the Vinci Code, or the book, and then the movie, the Vinci Code. And so I looked up, this is from a slide share from a student in India, Pritiba Gohil. And so she's, actually, I think she might be an English professor, but she went into all the symbolism in the Da Vinci Code. So for those who haven't read the book, it's kind of an action, adventure, mystery about, well, it's a murder mystery, but it goes back into the backstory of the Mona Lisa and the Knights Templar and Jesus and Mary Magdalene and how it all connects.
But a hound dog.
Are you singing about Jesus?
Yeah, Mary Magdalene. That's what they're saying.
Well, part of it takes place at the Louvre in Paris, the great museum, and the new pyramid that's there, and trying to find. I'm not sure if they were looking for the Grail. I don't remember what they were looking for.
Not in the beginning.
But the symbolism of the receptive V, which you mentioned in your talk, and then the blade, which is the maybe aggressive or outward pointing, certainly. And I thought of that, male and female plugs. I mean, there's a reason we call them male and female plugs, right? Because one is receptive and one is forward moving. What's the other?
I'm not touching this. I got in trouble
We'll come
before.
back to that. I'm going to stop the share and we'll come back to that.
Okay.
You got in trouble before?
Yes.
Have you had have people given you a good talking to since the talk yesterday, or
I've
not?
had some input, not about this week, but the week is early.
That's right. It's only Monday.
Someone gave me a synopsis of it. It was like, oh, men.
That sounds like the theme song to 2.5 Men.
Yeah. Men.
That's exactly it. Well, I thought
divine feminine.
I thought it was interesting. Like I was getting ready to let's launch into the divine feminine, and then you said, let's do it from the perspective of masculine.
Why not?
Wah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to speak.
But that's your perspective.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of men. Because to me, it doesn't do any good to speak to the divine feminine unless you're going to make it relevant to men who are going to just go, oh God, not this again.
Right. Yeah.
So I felt like I laid it out quite succinctly.
I think you did indeed.
And then we can continue my rationale about that is we have weeks to explore some of the more, dare I say, traditional threads of the divine feminine.
Okay.
Because as you know, I love me some history.
Yes.
Or in this case, herstory.
Ah, very good. Very clever.
You know, this is Women's Month. Did you know
that's
that?
why it's the divine feminine. I asked about that last week. And that's one of the things that I found interesting listening to your talk is last week when we were doing our thoughts on talks, you were already kind of preparing for the talk. And so we were talking about androgyny, which took us into a whole discussion about music. And so I felt like the ideas had evolved, or that you had gone deeper with them since we talked about it the week before.
Yes. Well, I was pondering all week.
Yeah.
And
as I'm sure you do every week, but this is maybe a different.
Well, sometimes there's just so much material that it's hard to winnow things out.
So it probably helps that you have several weeks to cover.
Yeah, well, and because some of this stuff, let's face it, I'm learning it because I'm not a woman.
This is true.
So
you are not.
I have those cultural downloads as to what feminine is, femininity, as well as masculinity.
Yeah.
And they're either right, wrong, or a little of both.
Probably a little of both.
Yeah.
The picture that I just showed that I took away, I'm going to bring it back up now because I found in your notes a story that you didn't tell.
Yes.
And
I was out of time.
So this is a stone.
Can't show that stone because it's on my mind. All right.
It's a river stone. And do you want to tell the story instead of reading it? It looks like.
Well, yeah. So this kid, let's see, what's his name?
Adam Foley.
Yeah, Adam Foley was an exchange student in India. And so he ended up, I think, if I remember right, he ended up spending like 15 years there.
Wow.
But he was on a pilgrimage of sorts, and he ran into a holy man, which I understand there's a lot of those around there.
Okay. Like ascetics that are out in the wilderness.
Yeah, particularly around the Ganges River, right?
Okay.
So he was a powerful, obviously a very calm and powerful presence who came up to him, and he handed him a stone. This is not an acorn, but a stone.
Yeah.
That has been rounded, and he was speaking to the band that's running through it. And the band representing the masculine that gives witness to the stone or the feminine. And so, yes, it was an interesting idea, and the first service got it, but the second service did not, for whatever reason. I don't remember why.
Things happen. So it says in your notes, you say the masculine witnesses the substance of the totality of the rock, while the substance, the rock itself, is the whole incarnation of the material universe, the divine feminine. The masculine witnesses the universe, the feminine is the universe.
Right.
So that kind of goes back to the womb of creation.
Right. And he wrote that. I did not.
Okay. So that's adamfoley.org.
Adamfoley.org, and his wife is Alyssa Romero. And they do these workshops. I think they call them Spirit Flame or Twin Flame or Flame On or something. I don't know what. But
I think I have more pictures from their website. Oh, yeah.
So there's your idea of the inverted triangles.
Right, which we showed the chalice and the blade.
Right.
And then if you just nudge those triangles a little bit more, you get the six-pointed star.
Right.
Which I was looking up if the Star of David was ever known, because in the Pritiba's notes, the slides, she calls it the Star of Venus and then shows a six-pointed star. But when I did research, I couldn't find any other reference to, when I looked up Star of Venus, it wasn't necessarily a six-pointed star, and that the origin of the Star of David seems to be very mysterious as well. So these are maybe just symbols that humanity
well, you got to
responds
figure,
to.
right? So the triangle certainly was known by many cultures.
Mm-hmm.
And, but, you know, it is a symbol of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure there is, if we had a rabbinical scholar here, he could probably run it down to us. Because I'm sure there's an ancient connection to it.
Yeah, at the very
probably
least.
To do with, you know, God represented as one and man as the other, and together they make the sacred covenant of the chosen people, which is total BS on my part. But
belief system?
Yes.
You've
so
just
in other words,
created it based on what you know.
I just kind of made it up.
Okay.
So,
but it sounds good. I'm going with it.
Don't take that to your next.
This is a whole other topic here on androgyny. So you have a quote about life being androgynous, which I think might come from Ernest Holmes. And I was thinking, when I think of androgyny, I think of David Bowie. We now have a song from David Bowie stuck in our head from before the show. I think of Boy George, certainly from the 80s. I never thought of Katharine Hepburn as androgynous, though. But there she's wearing a men's suit and her hair's back.
Yeah, there's nothing masculine going on there except the suit.
and I guess it's just Hepburn. A choice of expression could be androgyny.
She was in her George Eliot phase.
There you go.
Aren't you surprised I know who she was?
I'm not.
Oh,
I am. Okay, I applaud you. Very good. You know a lot of things. I'm not surprised. One of the things you mentioned, though, I'm going to school you on, but I had to look it up first. So you mentioned Father, Mother, God.
Yes.
And the first time you heard it was at a wedding, a family wedding.
A unity,
A unity minister-led wedding. And what year was that, would you say?
80s.
Yeah, I would say the first time I heard Father, Mother, God, it was probably mid-80s.
Yeah.
And when I looked it up to see how long it's been around, I found an article from about 85. But then I found a reference to Mary Baker Eddy writing about it in 1875.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So Christian Science has been using it for a while, at least it's in their writings, whether they picked it up as an organization and started using it.
Well, you know, Mary Baker Eddy was, you know, she was a force, man. And she really was the first one. I mean, she used to speak to thousands of people. And so people often speak, particularly in New Thought circles, of how Emma Curtis Hopkins is the teacher of teachers, which she was. But Mary Baker Eddy was her teacher, and she was her, oh gosh, I don't know. I think she served in the capacity of like an archivist.
Oh, okay.
And I think she also helped to run her seminary.
Okay.
But then theologically, they kind of parted ways in some areas.
Right.
And so Hopkins went off, I think, to Chicago and started her own school. And then Holmes, of course, Ernest Holmes ran into her later in her life, early in his.
Okay.
But Nona Brooks, I believe, and the Dressers, I believe the Fillmores even were all students of hers. So
that would make that unity connection where you and I both heard it,
right?
Which the Father, Mother, God, because the Charles and Myrtle Fillmore were the founders of Unity, and
right.
So it's all connected, but it's interesting
how. So is
it
true,
like that,
speaking that it is divine feminine and all that? So was Myrtle Fillmore really the brains in that outfit? Didn't I read that somewhere?
Yeah, she was really the founder. It was her inspiration. She had gone to hear a talk about healing because she had had an illness from childhood. I think it was tuberculosis. And and she came back from that and started affirming, I am a child of God, and therefore I do not inherit sickness. And her own healing is what convinced Charles that this was really working.
Right.
And then they started just small prayer groups. And then he was a businessman. And so he's the one who started testing the principles in his business and then taking that out. And so that's why Unity Village is there in Missouri today, because he, you know, was into real estate and into publishing and really built it up. So,
well, and he did he not have a leg that was shorter?
He did, and he was able to lengthen the leg. And so, yeah, it's based on healing, and they never intended for anybody to make it a church. It became that because people asked, but it was really just supposed to be kind of study after you've gone to your Sunday service, to come in and get a little metaphysical about stuff, a little deeper. So yeah, this the divine feminine is not a foreign concept in New Thought circles.
Correct.
And Father, Mother, God is just a way of putting it together. And the thought occurred to me with androgynous. I think of androgynous as a little bit of both, like in the pictures of those celebrities. But
did you ever think of that musician we were trying to remember last week?
Do you remember what we were trying to remember? Because I don't even remember that much.
Because I said something about Bjork, and you said no.
Bjork is very girly.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure who you're thinking of, but I think of the divine.
They have models, though, right? They have like androgynous models now.
Yeah,
where you're like going.
Well, yeah, and there's a lot of like, because cross-dressing doesn't necessarily mean you're transgender either. So there's people who are just, you know, creative and expressive, and but that's still a little bit of both in human form, whereas the divine is, I think of that as beyond a binary.
We're all cross-dressers in the divine.
We're trust fund babies and cross-dressers. I love it.
Right. So
we're very creative.
This
humans.
body is just the mortal coil.
True. Let's see what else I have on my little slide share. Is that it? I thought I had another one, but maybe I didn't put it together. Let's see. It was more about the
Boy George, though.
Yeah.
I never really thought I actually thought he was a girl.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
But his voice is quite low, and his name is George. He's a guy.
Yeah. Did you hear the joke that he used to tell?
No.
Because I used to subscribe to Rolling Stone back in those days.
And
they asked him if he was bisexual, and he said, "Why, yes, I always have to buy sex."
I heard in a Cheech and Chong movie, they said one of the characters, I don't know who it was, said that they were trisexual because they'll try anything. I got a laugh out of you. That's good.
Clever.
So back to spirituality and divine femininity. I loved studying goddesses when I was in college. I was also studying the women's movement and the speeches given by the leaders of the women's movement. So I hope that you're gonna, I mean, you did a little bit talk about different goddesses.
Because I just want to get my facts straight. So, because I was, reading about Lakshmi, Saraswati, the Tuatha De Danann, which is a Celtic peoples associated with Ireland.
Okay.
They are the followers of Danu, which is a Celtic goddess. And then, of course, you have Athena,
which
Greek
came
culture,
up as like
Minerva.
Minerva, I think,
the Roman
is
equivalent.
Athena.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And it came up when I looked up a list of androgynous, spiritual beliefs. She came up as one of them, but she's very goddessy, but she's just masculine and maybe
because she was
powers and focus.
Well, and if you remember the Odyssey, she was the patroness of Odysseus.
Okay.
And so she's the goddess of war, but also of wisdom.
And I think law is one of them.
Probably, yeah.
They all have a lot of...
they're multitaskers.
They are, those Greek gods.
And then because I was trying to keep all of them straight too.
Mm-hmm.
And then Aphrodite, of course, is, love.
Yes.
And I was actually.
And Venus is her Roman equivalent.
Yes. But I was wondering if Aphrodite was also fertility.
I think so.
So I know the Saxon goddess of fertility is Eoster.
Easter.
Yes. And so that's where that word comes from.
Mm-hmm. And so we're coming up. We're coming to the Easter season. Yes. Lent has begun.
Get those bunnies and eggs ready.
Thank you, Easter Bunny. Bok, bok.
Yeah. Isn't it so weird how that even became a thing, right?
Yeah. Bunnies and eggs.
Resurrection.
You can.
One of these things also doesn't belong here.
Right. And when I lived in Sri Lanka, that same period of time is the harvest. Oh. So there's a celebration and it's around Easter. It just doesn't have anything to do with Easter. It's about not even spring and growth, which is here. And it's not, It's the same hemisphere, but it's just closer to the equator, and it's the rice harvest and fruit and stuff like that. So there's a celebration of plenty and Thanksgiving around that time.
Rice wine?
No, that's a Japanese thing.
Oh, the Sri Lankans didn't figure that
Sri
one out?
Lankans do arak and toddy, which is coconut sap, I think, or
coconuts,
or young coconuts. So
they would have more of those.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah.
One of the slides you shared that I now get to find on our slide share is, let's see, I think I have to go to the screen and then share it to get, how do I make this stop sharing in full screen though?
How do I make
Let's see, try that. There it is. Nuns with guns.
Nuns with guns. That was a fun slide.
It did get a good laugh.
Well, because I set it up with the male perspective thing.
See, you got to set them up.
You got to set them up because I was pointing out that the two dominant characteristics of masculinity seemingly would be domination and aggression.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I made just when you look into the world of business and in our national pastime games, such as, football and the like, that's, and the way, corporate managers are often operate.
Mm-hmm.
Even the seemingly benign people like Mitt Romney know how to go in and cut thousands of workers to help the bottom line. So there's kind of that cutthroat thing, right? That dog eat dog thing. And that, and I just made the observation that we really don't know any women with those traits, except maybe these girls.
Nuns with guns.
Yes. And they're all smiling. So I think they're quite tickled that they're.
Well, when I looked up to find this image, it was like the Vatican shooting club or something like that. I don't know if it's a real thing though.
Yeah, because I think those are shotguns. Yeah, those are shotguns. So they were probably, are they shotguns? No, there's a bolt.
Oh.
Yeah, so who knows what they are, but I think they were just tickled to be getting their
chance to be.
I'm wondering if the gal on the left, yeah, she doesn't look serious enough to be Mother Superior, but she could be.
She could be. Isn't there a line from a Beatles song about a Mother Superior with a gun?
Mother Superior jumped the gun. She jumped the gun.
She jumped it. She didn't just hold it and smile.
Yeah.
So yes, the
happiness is a warm gun.
Okay, I'm saying stop share, but it's not really stopping the share. We're going to have to stare at these nuns and their guns. There we go.
Click it.
Had to use the right tool.
Click it good.
So one of the other things when I was looking up androgyny that came up in my search was hermaphrodites, which takes it like to an extreme level.
Yeah.
But that's the slide that I thought I had that apparently didn't save.
I think that's probably a good thing, right?
It wasn't a picture.
Oh.
It was quotes from an article on the Guardian about how Native Americans had, when people were androgynous, they were people of two spirits. So it wasn't about their body. It was that within them they expressed as two different beings. And in India, I remember from when I worked at Young Asia Television, if somebody's born a hermaphrodite, they're very special and kind of revered in some ways, not in every way, but when babies are born, they take them to be blessed by, they're called hijras, Hijra, because it's like divinity, because it's both.
Right.
So of course, that's from a spiritual perspective. From a social perspective, they're often shunned and have to go live with each other and find a place that's kind of outside of the normal order of things. So
to the hermaphrodite colony, there can't be enough of them for a colony.
I don't think there's a colony. The art or the stories that we did on them at Young Asia Television were maybe a house with 5 or 6 of them living together there and sharing whatever money they made.
Wow.
Together. Yeah. So we're in the kids room here at CSL GH, Granada Hills. And I was thinking about how gender roles are taught from a very young age, from the time that we give children toys to play with.
Right. Trucks and dolls.
Right. And it's interesting to see, if you just let kids choose for themselves, that not all of them, if you don't force the issue, there are girls who like things with wheels and there are boys that maybe don't. I actually know twin boys, they're adults now, but when they were young, one of the twins didn't like to play with trucks and normal boy things. He was very feminine. I don't know how that expresses now that he's grown up, but he liked to play with dolls and he liked colorful things. And so his mother certainly fought for him to have the right to choose what he wanted to play with and how he wanted to express himself. And the father maybe wasn't quite as supportive, maybe. So I could see how that part having
takes some of us a while to come around to things, you know.
And I think part of it too is, as a parent, you must be concerned about your child being ostracized. That's a inherent fear.
You know, it's
or your son getting beat up.
Why make things more difficult when life is going to be challenging enough, right? Particularly when you get into junior high, right?
Yeah.
Those little beggars can be brutal, man.
It's true.
I know. I was, I was on the giving and receiving end of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess in today's age, where the divine feminine and the women's movement and maybe the Me Too movement has influenced parents as well, there are creative ways afoot, I'm sure, of helping kids just be who they are rather than trying to force them.
Well, yeah. And, I'm also thinking about, and this is what I'm looking forward to exploring. So, like in Christianity, the virgin birth was something that was argued about in the early Christian church until they finally, and I need to learn more about it. I just know that it wasn't a given, because there were several different churches in the early Christian church. That was part of what the Council of Nicaea was about.
Right.
Let's pick some, and then this is the way we're going to go from now on.
Well, I remember in reading the book Zealot, at least I think that's where I read it, which is about the story of Jesus with historical basis. The idea that socially he wasn't considered Joseph's son. Like there was that social stigma that because Mary was pregnant before they were married. And so that
gave him a tude.
I'm sure
cosmic
did.
tude.
Woo! There's a call from him right now. Jesus has something to say. He's calling Reverend Mike directly. So
I'll tell you how it was.
That's how you should listen. Why you should listen to him. So you were talking about the Christian church and that being disputed.
Well,
is Mary divine?
There is a school of thought that Mary was kind of venerated to help bring along, particularly in ancient times, to help bring along people who had a strong affinity with the divine feminine. And certainly in Ireland, in Croatia, there was a sighting of the Blessed Virgin. Wasn't that correct? Croatia? Or what? No, Bosnia.
Okay.
That was during the 90s. That there was a sighting. And so there was a guy going around.
From the Vatican, checking those things out?
No, he was one of the people who saw her.
Like she was walking around, or it was like a ghost?
She was appearing.
Okay.
And so this guy had an event at St. Monica's. This must have been the mid-90s. And anyway, so he was, the church is packed, and St. Monica's is a large church. The place is packed, and everyone's saying the rosary, and then all of a sudden he's looking up and he's talking.
Oh, to someone else.
To someone else.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I have always been a skeptic of such things. I would, but and then I hear things like, in order to see such things, you have to believe that they're possible.
Yes.
So, which makes me even more skeptical, of course.
Well,
right? Because, the reason why I like the science of mind is because we are encouraged to demonstrate the power of the Spirit through prayer in a conscious way. And now that has a couple of wrinkles within it. Number one, you're acknowledging that God, in fact, does exist. And the other reason why I like religious science is the encouragement to really broaden that out, which is where we eventually got yesterday with the divine feminine and the divine masculine being, those are the two aspects that make up the androgynous one.
Right.
That both are present.
Oneness.
Right, like the stone. Right, so in Foley's story, that the masculine is giving witness to the feminine, and that the feminine is just itself. And this is not unlike the way religious science describes the way that our thought, how our thoughts become things through the power of prayer. In that our thought then is the blade, or the assertive masculine principle,
right,
impregnating the womb of nature, or the sacred feminine, or the divine feminine, which is that aspect of the mind of the spirit that knows only to say yes.
The receptive.
The receptive that has no volition in and of its own.
Okay.
It just says yes.
Which reminds me
to whatever is put in there, right?
Yeah, of stories of, they're creation stories, really, that the divine was just sitting there still and happy and complete and peaceful, but got kind of bored. Mm-hmm. And so split into two so that it could have an experience of itself. And that it's just been multiplied with all of us having the experience of the divine in different angles and expressions. And
and through all of matter.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
From the tiniest components of matter, mm-hmm. that there is the essence of consciousness of the divine within all of it. Now that's mm-hmm. a trippy one to contemplate.
Yeah, it's easy for me to connect that with sentient beings and with mm-hmm. nature,
or with biology. Even.
Yeah, with biology, but all of matter seems.
Yeah, you mean like a rock?
Like a table, you know. I'm trying to remember in a metaphysics class that I took that there was a distinguishing between the divine idea that leads humans to create a table mm-hmm. and is the table really infused with spirit. So it was a question that we debated because, you know, what metaphysics is. It's going beyond physics.
Right. And of course, you know, there's no real way to prove any of this stuff. So
not right now. I mean, maybe there'll be some sort of technology developed.
Yeah. Well, or we just have a more, you know, a revelation, you know, mm-hmm. of, you know, the way that we see the world. So it is all very interesting. And, mm-hmm. And so I'm very aware when I'm speaking and teaching that this is kind of our take on things, and that for me it's the thing that makes the most sense because it makes room for reason. Mm-hmm. Right.
And for everyone, for male and female and everything in between, however you're expressing.
Well, and you know, religious science has a strong track record in acknowledging mm-hmm.
The
power of the divine. We were one of the first to ordain women.
Yes.
And encourage women into the pulpit. I mean, for the longest time, Terry Cole Whitaker was one of the most popular religious science ministers, even though I don't know that she ever said the words religious science. But boy, she was certainly teaching it.
Yeah.
And, you know, I remember watching her myself on Sunday mornings and really liking what she had to say on an intuitive level. Mm-hmm. But some of the concepts are really out there.
Were they? I don't think I watched her, but I know that my grandmother watched her.
Wonderful energy.
Yeah.
And she's, you know, plus she was just really smashing looking. Mm. And she just had this great energy and mm-hmm. and she was having fun and she was encouraging people to have fun with the divine, as well as expect a miracle, right? And that that prosperity is your divine right. And I think it really helped the teaching of religious science because, like I said on Sunday, part of the attraction for guys like me is that it is a mental science. Mm-hmm. And in that, you know, the mind is a pretty safe place to hang out in, mm-hmm. right? So you can think deeply and you're not really called to feel.
Right.
When you're, you know, and so I think for men, for most men, regardless of their identity, sexual identity, I think we all think this way, that we appreciate the science part of it. And I think that's, at least the guys that I've talked to over the years, that's the part they really like, you know, that scientific part, the philosophical part, mm-hmm. just the mental science of it. And
and that's one of the ways that feminine and masculine are sort of divided when when people describe, like, feminine is more intuitive, is more heart-centered, it's more, taking care of others and bringing community together. In fact, that's what you have on one of your slides: collaboration, community, the felt sense rather than the thinking sense.
Right. That's from that Foley article, and he's quoting.
Oh no, this one says it's from bustle.com.
Right. I think that's the same one, right?
Okay.
With Suzanne Kingsbury.
That one says Dylan
right.
Assertier.
No.
And let's see if
That's
I can find it.
I stand corrected. You are correct.
Well, you've done such a good job of crediting people. I want to make sure we credit the right ones.
Try not to get sued. Well, also, when it comes to things that I'm not as well versed in, I want people to be able to go look it up. And some of the stuff I really like what Foley wrote about the stone. So I think it's important that people know that, when there's a brilliant idea that I didn't make up, that they know that it wasn't me. So, and not to speak ill of myself, but, original ideas don't just drop in your lap every day. At least they don't for me. And so I like to give credit to folks who have them.
Well, and it's another gift that you as a minister, as a spiritual director give, of sharing all of this knowledge that the rest of us haven't had the capacity, the bandwidth to study ourselves. So you gather the information and present it. And
so I have a question for you, because my talk yesterday was definitely geared towards men. I mean, that was to me, it seemed pretty obvious.
And I think you said that too at one point, that you're talking to the guys. But
it wasn't my intention that women be able to get an insight as to the way men see the world, or maybe the way the patriarchy has evolved the way it has because of the way we see things. You know what I'm saying?
I think I know what you're saying. And I think that for women, we're pretty clear on how men see the world because we've been subject to it.
But you're subject to the effect of it, not the thinking behind it.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think men are starting to realize, really, I think it's, even though we've been hammered on about this stuff. I mean, I came of age in the 70s. So this women's rights stuff was Jimmy Carter I was just reading today that Jimmy Carter made the first week in March Women's Week, and in 7 years, the month became, this one, the 19th Amendment was enacted, or how you say, ratified.
Okay.
And so it just kind of gained its own momentum. And of course, the women's movement, in my opinion, I don't know for sure, but it emerged out of the civil rights movement, right?
They were
certainly
sort of
on the heels of
almost competing movements at the time.
Yeah.
Actually, before, during the Civil War.
But, it was very confusing. Dating and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
So, I was like, all right, ERA. So we're splitting the tab, right? No. Right?
Well, see.
But then as you go along, right, then you learn, oh, well, women were only getting paid half of what we were getting paid.
Yeah.
Right?
Good point.
So there were reasons, and, it was also control.
Yeah, I mean, studying
to get
the history. Yeah.
Right?
Studying,
if we're honest about it,
the women's movement and the history of, when things shifted from goddess to patriarchal god, you can see how that control, which wasn't there previously when goddesses were nature and gods, and most of the gods that had pantheons of gods had male and female, and nature and all of it was included. And the power that patriarchy has had and has used over the centuries has just
millennia.
Yeah, has gotten more and more extreme and exclusive culturally. So yeah, I mean, I'm always fascinated, and I get more and more in touch as I'm doing more of my own studies into sort of the history of it, and going back to ancient spiritual practices that were nature-based and feminine oriented.
Right. Well, one of the books that I'm reading, about 4 books right now.
Mhm.
One of them is Sapiens.
Mm.
I'm about through the first quarter of it. Do you know this book?
Mm-mm.
It's very dense,
Hmm.
and no pictures.
Oh.
So it's just a lot of information, but it's very well written, and it's an easy read, but it's just packed with data. And so I'm just now, so one of the things it talks about is man as an apex predator, right? And how there were these gigantic marsupials on the Australian continent, for instance, but humans ate them all. And in North America, there were these like 20-foot tall sloths.
Wow.
That weighed like a couple tons.
Wow.
And America had its own horse, but we ate them.
I saw a nature documentary about the Rapa Nui people who built the Easter Island heads.
Yes.
And they used all of their resources to build those heads to look stronger to their opposing island neighbors, and to move them to the right position. And they ate everything and cut down all the trees, and they died as a people because they were so focused on looking strong to somebody else.
Yeah.
They are gone now.
Well, and this is ultimately, this guy is making the point that we were actually healthier, stronger, taller as hunter-gatherers. Life was very difficult. We were often hungry. And then as we moved into agriculture, that we actually were working harder. And he goes, develops that whole idea. But I suspect where he's heading in the book is how we moved, because in the Celtic, the Celtic culture was a matriarchy, and there were other cultures in Europe, what was to become Europe, that were focused on the feminine as the dominant force rather than the masculine. So I have a feeling that as we became more agrarian and started raising, because he's also talking about how our diets were better. We weren't, a single grain. But I suspect, I don't know, but I suspect that really what it was about was not only making bread, but also beer. I suspect that a lot of the community effort was around creating alcohol, because
could be,
what better motivator than, it just
feeling
sounds
good.
Like life was hard. You get, a couple glasses of grog. Plus, I'm not sure, but I would think that because it's fermented, it might be a better source of water because it's been fermented. So maybe it also kept
certain
pathogens.
Bacteria and
I don't
things
know.
Like that.
I'm just guessing. Maybe that would keep the typhus down, for instance.
Perhaps.
Or I don't know. But we'll see. I just started reading the book.
Okay. So again, you're making it up right now. Second time in one episode.
Well,
it happens. That's because you're creative. You're putting pieces together.
This is my brother.
Oh.
Yes.
So should we wrap it up so you can talk to your brother?
Yes, I'm just going to text him.
Okay.
Because he's here visiting from He's here visiting from Florida.
Oh, okay.
And I have to get with him today.
Okay, so while you're texting, I'll read some of the quotes from your slides.
Excuse me, everyone.
Watch while he texts. So then let me pick one. Mankind reenacts the divine nature and makes use of the same laws that God uses. We find in mankind the same androgynous nature that we find in God. That's from Science of Mind, Repression and Sublimation. The spirit of sex. Whoa. Who knew it was so sexy? Science of Mind. Let's see. And we have an affirmation. I am a being of love and light. Divine feminine energy flows through me, receiving and radiating love. And that makes me think of, you mentioned the symbol of the yin-yang, which has opposites and a little bit of the other in each side. And it's a wonderful symbol of balance and unity and diversity all at once. And what else are we missing? Have you sent it yet? Have you sent it? I'm losing things to vamp with.
the Tao symbol?
Yeah, I'm looking through your notes. Oh, okay. To share it. Let's see, I'll find it on the screen share. But I mean, people know what it is. You called it the surf symbol because I guess you've seen surfers using it. Is that what you meant?
Well, it was, no. Well, this is the one that just came up, but
oh, okay.
That's not really accurate.
No, it's yin-yang or yin-yang.
Oh, there you go, yin-yang. That's right. Let me try that.
And it's a good image in a lot of ways because within each of us, there's light and dark.
Yeah.
There's light and shadow. There's,
ebony and ivory.
That's right. They live together in perfect harmony. Oh, there it is.
There it is. So you have in the white a little dot of black, and in the black a little dot of white.
Mm-hmm.
So, which is a very clever way to explain the whole thing.
Yeah, that nothing is only one thing.
Right.
So.
We all know that people are the same wherever they go. There is good and bad in everyone. Learn to live.
I think that means it's time to go here. When we've just
what
evolved
we need
into
to
singing.
Survive together alive.
That was Michael Jackson and
Ebony.
Stevie Wonder and Paul McCartney.
Michael Jackson.
No, Michael Jackson did Say, Say, Say with Paul McCartney. Ebony and Ivory, I think, was Stevie Wonder and Paul McCartney. Shall we look it up?
Let's put some money on it first.
We're getting like that, are we? Okay, we're going to search now. Ebony
and Ivory.
Oh, okay. He's going to do it that way.
Ebony and Ivory.
Who's with me?
Oh, you're right.
Yes! Stevie
Wonder.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that explains why the harmonies were so much better.
Oh, it's all good.
Boy, he was getting around in those days.
Stevie?
No.
Paul?
Sir Paul.
He was,
Stevie.
He wanted to hang out with the people.
Jackson.
Hang out with other musicians.
Yeah.
He's,
That was actor.
Because he could.
John got it, huh?
Yeah. So he had to make
new
friends.
You were just a kid then, huh?
What year was it? Yeah, I was a kid. It was early 70s, right?
If you have to ask, you don't know.
That meant I was very young.
I think it may have been 1980, but I'm not certain.
Oh, really? Okay. I was still a kid then.
Anyway.
Okay, so that's not.
How does it feel to say that? Doesn't it feel good to know you were just a kid? And because I remember 1980 really well.
Yeah.
As a grown-ass man.
I mean, I remember it pretty well for
a very immature grown-ass man.
Time.
Anyway. All right.
We are timeless.
Speaking of time.
There's a clock on the wall just to show that we're timeless.
Time to go.
That's what it's showing. All right, thanks for joining us. Oh, did you want to show your cool shirt? Oh, you're showing it right now. You did kind of a Superman thing with it. It looks good on one of the screens. I don't know if both of them are showing now. There you go. Interfaith Solidarity Network. Yes. Okay. Thanks for joining us on Thoughts on Talks. See you next week.
Peace, love, dove.